The fact of the matter is that America is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. But anyone who took the walk that we took around this neighborhood would not think you're in a wealthy nation. You would think that you were in a third world country where unemployment is over 50%. A community that does not even have decent quality grocery stores where moms can buy quality food for their kids. A community in which the dream of getting a higher education for many kids is as real as is going to the moon. In the United States of America, 37% of African American children should not be living in poverty. In the United States of America, we should not be having more people in jail than any other country on earth, disproportionately Black and Hispanic. In the United States of America, we should not have a child care system which is largely dysfunctional and unaffordable. We need fundamental changes in our national priorities. We do not need to give more tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires. We need to start investing in communities all over this country today that are hurting, that are often forgotten about. And rather than sending our kids to jail, we should be investing in jobs and education. We don't need more jails. We don't need more incarceration. There is an enormous amount of work to be done, and we have the people to do that work. What we need is changes in our national priorities and to stop ignoring those many, many millions of people who are hurting today, who are not receiving the kind of attention or redress that they are entitled to from their government. Thank you.
Well, Field, if there are any questions from the press.
Senator, we talked to some people in the community. They said they were skeptical because there are not enough jobs. And you have a $1 trillion infrastructure plan, which, how is that going to get into these communities? A lot of times that money ends up in developers, or as it has in Baltimore City. How is it going to get to the people who need it?
Well, the first thing we have to do is to recognize the reality of real unemployment in America. The official unemployment rate is 5%. The real unemployment rate is 10%, and for the African American community, it is substantially higher than that. So we have several ideas, not just limited to these ideas, but several ideas that are out there on the table today. And number one, when you invest $1 trillion over 5 years, you create 13 million decent paying jobs. And in addition to that, you can create a whole lot of jobs rebuilding not only our crumbling infrastructure, our roads and bridges and water systems, but the kind of housing situation we are seeing right here in this community. We can put people to work all over America building affordable housing. Second of all, working with Congressman John Conyers of Michigan, he and I have introduced legislation that would provide 1 million jobs specifically for low-income kids, disproportionately, again, African American and Hispanic kids. Makes a lot more sense to me to be getting kids jobs rather than seeing them hang out on street corners and end up in jail. So we've got a lot of work to do, but we have some very specific proposals to put millions of people back to work, doing the work that America needs to see done.
Senator Sanders, pertaining to the economic justice issues that you talked about today, where on your priority list will those kinds of issues fall?
At a very high level. It's not just the need to create millions of jobs. It is the need to make sure that the jobs that we have pay people a living wage. And that's why I have fought for and believe that we should raise the minimum wage over a period of several years to $15 an hour. And we need pay equity for women workers so they don't continue to earn 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. And we need a new trade policy, by the way, which says to corporate America that instead of investing in China, that maybe they might want to start reinvesting in Baltimore or in the state of Vermont or in the state of California, because we have a trade policy which has cost us millions of decent paying jobs. And when we talk about the economy, you have to talk about education. And that means not only supporting the historically black colleges and universities, in addition to that, we have got to make sure that every kid in America, regardless of his or her income, understands that if he or she studies hard, they will be able to get a higher education, because we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Bottom line is, in the last 30 years, we have seen a massive transfer of wealth from working families to the top 0.1%. What this campaign is about, and what my presidency about, is transferring that wealth back into the hands of working families, back into our cities, back into our communities. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We can create a society in which all of our people have a decent standard of living, not a society in which almost all new income and wealth goes to the top 1%. That's what I'm dedicated to changing.
Senator Sanders, yesterday the Department of Justice launched another civil rights investigation into a large police force. Your criminal justice reforms, while broad, have focused a lot on prisons and sentencing. How much do you think police reform and structural racism is an issue?
I think it's a huge issue, and now if you read what our principles are about, it deals with police reform, and it deals with the need to make sure that police departments around this country are held accountable. I'm glad. I made a request that the federal government do an investigation into what happened in Chicago and into the Chicago Police Department. It is my view that when any individual is killed or dies while in police custody, that should bring forth a federal investigation. It is my view that the federal government can play a very important role in terms of police reform by providing incentives to local police departments around the country to do the right thing. And the right thing is to demilitarize our police departments. The right thing is to make sure that police officers have the training that they need to understand that lethal force is the last resort, not the first resort, to make sure that police departments look like the communities that they serve in terms of their diversity. So there's a lot to be done, but police reform is certainly something that I believe is part of real criminal justice reform. Yeah.
I would like to know about employment for ex-offenders.
Yeah.
And training for the categories as well as for people who left high school before graduating.
Who have, I'm sorry?
Left high school before
Yeah,
graduation.
okay, yeah. Look, again, every American should be deeply ashamed that we have more people in jail than any other country, 2.2 million people. We are spending $80 billion a year locking up fellow Americans. Even some of my conservative friends are beginning to understand that that does not make a lot of sense. And what you're talking about is the very high rate of recidivism that we have. So what sense is it that somebody who serves his time then goes back out, doesn't have job training, doesn't have education, lives in inadequate housing? What's going to happen to that person? They will fall back into the same environment that got him into jail in the first place. And then we're going to end up spending another $60,000 a year incarcerating that person. Obviously, it makes a lot more sense, to my mind, to make sure that when that person leaves jail, that person has the capability of holding down a job, that there is a job available, that there are community services supporting that person so that they don't fall off the wagon, so to speak, and end up back in jail.
Senator,
All right, maybe one more question.
earlier you said that it's very expensive to be poor
Yes.
in America. Can you explain that?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. Take a walk around this community. Now, my wife Jane and I live in Burlington, Vermont. A few blocks away from where we live, there's a very nice grocery store, supermarket. We buy good quality food, produce at a reasonable price. You don't have that here. So the prices that people in this community are paying are substantially higher than what I pay, and the quality of the food that I get is significantly better. I put my money into a bank. I get some interest rates. If I have to cash a check, I'm not paying 15, 20, or 50%, or whatever the interest rates may be, to cash a check because I have a bank. I didn't notice too many local branch banks in this community because I guess there aren't any, okay? I can own a home, and at the end of the day, you gain wealth when you own a home and you don't have to rent. So the truth of the matter is that the interest rates the poor people pay are often higher. They're paying rent rather than living in their own homes, not to mention that the jobs that they're working in, by definition, are paying wages that are often inadequate to take care of their families. So being poor is, in fact, a very expensive proposition. Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you. Well, all right, what about ISIS, guys? How often are these people talking about the issues that we talked about today? Of course I'll talk about ISIS. But today what we're talking about is a community in which half of the people don't have jobs. We're talking about a community in which there are hundreds of buildings that are uninhabitable. We're talking about a community where kids are unable to go to schools that are decent. You want to ask me about ISIS? We will talk about ISIS. But what I said, and let me repeat, and you can agree with me or not, what I have said is that obviously ISIS and terrorism are a huge national issue that we've got to address. But so is poverty, so is unemployment, so is education, so is healthcare, so is the need to protect working families. And I will continue to talk about those issues. Thank you very much.